the thumbs up from YouTube, we'll get started. Nice chilly day in Gainesville. Actually feels kind of nice. We're good on YouTube. Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome YouTube. So we have 2 more seminars for the semester, right? Yeah. So today we're very lucky to have Dr. Eddie Hensel. So Dr. Hensel is an ecologist and educator interested in mitigating the effects of multiple stressors on coastal ecosystems. You are currently at the Nature Coast Biological Station, yes? And she works on resilience and conservation of biodiversity to aid overall resource sustainability. Her work aims to ensure that coastal communities can continue a culture of being intimately connected with their natural surroundings, and has conducted ecological research in coastal ecosystems internationally for over a decade. Her work integrates a diversity of disciplines, techniques, and communities, and in order to ask complex ecological questions using real life scenarios. So the real life scenarios are often with charismatic megafauna, often with predators that structure ecosystems with top-down sort of consumer and predator type relationships. And so I guess we're gonna hear a bunch about that today. So Andy, the floor is yours.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. This is a long one, so if you want to stand up, I have bad hips. I'm not like, you want to walk out, come back in. I'm just letting you know, like, I'm good with it. I'm cool with it. Just do what you need to. All right. So, yeah, interrupt me if something can't be heard or seen.
Yep, and if we would go over a topic that I think people might not be familiar with, I'll also ask like, hey, what do you mean by that?
Great. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Can do. And we're just gonna get the 4. Alrighty, so I am very happy to be here, and thank you again for the invite. Today's talk is a modified presentation of 2 projects, so I'm just piecing them together here today. The first is one from my first postdoctorate investigation during my time at VIMS, the Virginia Institute of Marine Science, where I was exploring how stingrays, who dig to like find their food, alter seagrass systems in the coastal bays off of Virginia and Chesapeake Bay. Then my second portion is a project called Scar Maps. And for that portion, we're going to explore the ecological impacts of boat propeller scars ripping through seagrass. And yes, I have, as much as possible, embedded some of my stingray observations into that investigation. So one thing to learn about me is that I really like field ecology to an obsessive level. And I do think it helps to explore in nature to help find answers to today's problems that we humans have created. This also means that I always need a very large and willing village wherever I go. And so I'm back here at UF literally like 10 years later since my last day as an undergrad. And I'm now the senior postdoc at the Nature Coast Biological Station in Cedar Key, Florida, working as with Dr. Savannah Berry and Dr. Laura Reynolds. And I have just found the most incredible team anyone can ask for. And I just thank all of them. So now let's talk some applied predator ecology. So I hope your main takeaway from my presentation today, you're over there in that corner, is that species interactions, including the disturbances they create, must be in and kept in the conversation for coastal management. And hopefully we'll understand what we mean by that by the end of this. So thinking about megafauna today, megafauna have shaped the ecology and evolution of ecosystems on Earth for over a millennium. But unlike their terrestrial megafauna that have undergone mass extinctions, marine megafauna have survived and they're still pretty functionally relevant in all of our systems. Mega consumers being long-lived, wide-ranging, they regulate food webs, they modify habitats, and they also alter nutrient dynamics through assimilation, peeing and pooping, and transporting what they ate and peeing and pooping. Yet in today's world, the effects of these fauna are rapidly changing from either they're just being neutral, helping create regulation, or maybe they had some positive interactions, but these are becoming, or at least perceived as, negative or potentially detrimental. And the plot thickens because rapid global change has put about 48% of these animals at risk of complete extinction by the end of the next century. So before intensifying human activities drive waves of mass extinctions of these marine megafauna, let's understand their role in structuring and maintaining coastal ecosystem function. So additionally, how can we manage, you just hit admit.
Yeah, please.
How can we manage and restore coastal habitats that have become vulnerable from shoreline development, intensifying extreme events like hurricanes, but are also critical for large fauna that may be also modifying that habitat? Dr. Bea, if in hands raised your hand if you know this story. Yeah, it's becoming classic, man, for UF, and I love this. This is just a wonderful example to share about thinking about the ecosystem holistically and everything involved. So they were given a task to, and I'm gonna go by this really quickly since I got a lot of raise of hands, but they were built the task to think about, okay, how can we restore this degraded and vulnerable seagrass system that was hit with a hurricane, but we also have natural disturbances within there that, you know, probably in the past, that extensive seagrass could withhold and it would help regulate, but now any stress is a stress on it. And so not only did they create these amazing blocks of restoring and transplanting seagrass, but they had it ready to deter natural disturbances from stingrays or sea turtles, or maybe, you know, the rare manatee that goes in there. And so simple. They're just little bamboo sticks, okay, that go in that you can get at the garden. They're biodegradable. They are not going to hurt a boat plowing through if for some reason they're plowing through it very, you know, within that part. They're also not an eyesore. They're not like this bright white thing poking out. And it helps because the rays, oh, you can't, oh, you can see me from that. And it helps because these rays, they can't get down, they can't bell shape curve over that seagrass and destroy it. So
we have a bamboo stick for you right there in the corner.
oh my gosh,
Just
yeah.
great, yeah.
This like props and
Yeah.
all, that's amazing. I'm gonna like keep hold of this now. So her and her team's work is just one, a fabulous example of really thinking about some holistic and ecological restoration, but also it's a great transition for me to suggest that large body stingrays and seagrasses are a really good model system to quantifying the role of large consumers across levels of ecological organization. Why, you may ask? Well, seagrasses are worldwide, and in the tropical and subtropical seagrasses, you'll also find a diversity, not just one kind, but a diversity of benthic-foraging rays. So sharing the conclusion of a recent review that was done on ray ecology, basically there's currently a need for studies at longer and larger spatiotemporal scales to measure their effects on ecosystem dynamics. They've kind of been left aside a little bit, where the more sexier fauna had been studied, like the sea turtles or the really large tiger sharks, right? So that's kind of where this comes from. And there's a need because we don't have inclusive general patterns. We have a lot of case studies at the moment. And a lot of these case studies are really extreme to what's happening with these stingrays. So one that comes off the right top of my head is Chesapeake Bay, where J.J. Orth was doing his dissertation in the 1970s in seagrass, and it got absolutely destroyed. Just this one plot of seagrass got completely destroyed in this experiment by a bunch of stingrays coming and bioturbating and digging up all of his seagrass. And so it quickly became a note and is one of the most highly cited papers to this day about the ecology of rays, and that they're incredibly detrimental for seagrass. The other one that comes to mind is that in the mid 2010s, there was a paper said that because large sharks are in decline along the mid-Atlantic, mesopredators are on the rise. So mesopredators meaning they're not the top dog, but they still eat meat, right? So that would be rays. So mesopredators are on the rise, which led to some miscommunication about rays being overpopulated. And so there became a media campaign in the mid 2010s up in Chesapeake that said, "Save the bay and eat a ray." suggesting that by consuming these cow-nosed rays, citizens would be aiding in the recovery of the degraded Chesapeake Bay. But guess what? We do like no monitoring. It's very hard to monitor rays and catch them and know their numbers. So we really have no concluded, solid evidence of what their population levels are. We have some indication of it. Stingrays also have this like economic layer to them of importance of why they're such a great model species. They interact with us and us with them. So some examples of that is that in aquaculture, they can be a real pain in the butt, like a deer is to a soybean farmer, trying to get scallops or trying to get clams. We also use them a lot for tourism, for like feeding events or snorkeling events, which also can change their behaviors, where they are, what they're eating, what they're doing naturally in their system. They, as you just saw before, we can have an effect when we're trying to do habitat restoration in pretty stressed areas. And then themselves are a fishery, even though we are kind of lacking some of these assessments. The just go get it, yourself, hunt it down and eat it. But also there's throughout the system, you'll throughout the like industry of restaurants, you may be ordering scallops in your pasta or on your sushi, and that's actually just little pops of rays. So to study the effects of rays at a larger scale, my team and I at Virginia Institute of Marine Science conducted a 2-year experiment in a 100% restored eelgrass meadow located in the coastal bays of Virginia. These meadows are massive. I'm talking like, well, Mark, it's in, relative for us now, but like 9,000 hectares where there was nothing, in the early 2000s. And then there was these 9,000 acres of these beautiful, luscious seagrass meadows. And so the main point of that is that just think of a very luscious, non-disturbed, not really patchy. There's not really much disturbance or stress going on in this seagrass. As you can see on this map of it being like a pretty large and continuous bed without any holes. That green showing you very thick seagrass, where this teal down below where I'm pointing is, let's say, like 35 to 55% covered. But the rest is over 50%. And so the other important thing is these coastal bays are also a incredibly huge migratory spot for dense fevers of rays of quite a few species, but the main one we think about is cownose out there and southerns and blunts. So one that's like swimming around and one that really likes to bell shape and go on the bottom. For decades, there has been some really strong aquaculture efforts to replenish these meadows with scallops, because they had a huge crisis and you can no longer harvest scallops there. They have recently rebounded so much that they're starting to have some talks about it. And so all of these facts kind of put together really make this like a fantastic combination to study the effects of rays out here. And so in these pristine meadows, we were asking what predicts ray foraging intensity, and then how do rays alter community structure as predators, but also habitat modifiers? Because, that is kind of the two things that they're known for, and they're known very well or perceived as being very detrimental for those habitats. So for our study, we did a paired plot design. You can kind of look at this map here. Where we had plots that were 15 by 15 meters wide. And you either had a cage around it so that it excluded large-bodied predators, main ones being rays out in that system, and the other ones were open, allowing them to swim in and out. And we did have this rainbow color just shows you high to low bivalve density being a potential another preference of where they're going. Maybe they're like seeking where more scallops are versus not. And to show you what those really look like in practice, these are our cages. Again, 15 by 15 meters, 8 feet tall. And then the pairs were 100 meters apart from one another. And then each pair was at least 500 meters apart. from one another. We conducted several snorkel surveys throughout the large meadow, as well within our plots at the beginning and end of the season, so that we could do our measurements of predicting potentially where they're going, as well as using these cages or exposures to study what they might be having an effect as a predator on scallops. So for the trying to predict kind of where these rays may be going, we were able to do a few surveys out there, and nothing too conclusive, but the best thing that I can tell you is that we saw some evidence. The thing that's showing here is just the number of ray pits. So we didn't actually like count the actual rays, but we used their pits as a form of intensity of how many times individuals or many individuals were trying to eat with their ray pits of digging into the grass and looking for shrimps, clams, scallops on the surface. And basically, the visual tells what the graph says is that we did see slightly more ray pits on that y-axis in patchy areas or edges or areas that had an edge, like the end of that huge massive bed that we worked in, where we found some but fewer ray pits in super dense included areas, which that makes really intuitive sense to me that you go to an area that already has like a slice of the pie cut for you, and you can just like head in there and look for what you're looking for, rather than like starting from scratch where you don't care about that seagrass. That's extra work and effort to try to find your prey. Thinking about kind of that larger scale, are they, they are known to and perceived to have these like, and can be really have detrimental habitat effects, especially on like what seagrasses when they're vulnerable. But in this extremely luscious seagrass beds, when we were looking inside of our exclosures, we looking at like the mean seagrass cover, like percentage of cover. Yes, you can see these are significantly different, being from 97 to 94, but that's still within 90% cover of seagrass. So not really having a strong ecological effect on these like luscious non-stressed beds.
What was the duration of the exposure experiment?
2 years. What we did find was some pretty ecologically significant predator effects though from these rays. One from an RE student, Tiffany Wong, found, we're just thinking of the proportion of eaten items, either being scallops or worms, but in a ray hole, so that prey may be exposed, we found that items were not eating, the regular predators were not eating it, whereas scallops were being eaten more often within seagrass. And that's likely a culprit of, in a ray pit, you're changing that structure. And we're very thinking this goes along with other work within North Carolina, that probably one of the predators to these scallops are blue crabs. Blue crabs have the ability to take that effort to crack that shell when they're hidden in the seagrass, but when they're exposed with this ray hole, if the scallop goes there, it's almost kind of safe from maybe its main predator. Not to anthropomorphize too much, but that's just kind of my thoughts here on when I'm seeing a little bit of these differences here, and showing that it parallels with some complementary research in North Carolina. Within our exclosures, where we did manipulate the presence and absence of these animals, so open meaning they can go to it, exclosure meaning that rays cannot go to it, we did see a significant difference in the density, the number of scallops that were in there. This is just after one season, by the way, this data. I don't have, I didn't update this to both seasons. And we also saw a big change in their size distribution. So kind of changing a little bit of their demographics, a little bit of what's there. And basically what we found in that open plot, so behind the blue, quite maybe a targeted size for these rays. And so too small, not getting enough bang for your buck. It's mostly just shell, not enough meat. And then the larger ones, maybe it's just too much effort to crack open for them. Maybe it's, you know, gape limitation. They literally can't open their mouth, or it's a pressure bite type system. And so we're wondering, maybe there is this target size. Which leads me back to rumors in Virginia, thinking about, they open a fishery, curious if they may be implementing some of these potential findings of bag limit or minimum scallop size, of thinking if is this target for this already natural predator in the system. So my main takeaways is that I hope you've learned from this project one. Remember, this is like the stretchy time if you guys need it. It's nice and toasty in here, so it's like a perfect nap.
Yeah, and then it's gonna get cold in a minute, so.
Yeah, okay. But so I hope you've learned from sharing my study in Virginia that even in dense, luscious seagrasses, we observe that ray foraging preference can have slight changes on the seagrass patchiness, but doesn't have necessarily very extreme effects on modifying that habitat. But we did see measurable effects on the faunal, both community dynamics, maybe who is eating whom, how often, and then also them having that predator effect on their scallops. So now transitioning, the Nature Coast of Florida is another example of a really unique system where we have just the biggest, largest, most beautiful, like continuous seagrass. I'm astonished. I lived in Florida my whole life and I didn't know it existed. But I use this word pristine with quotes because, you know, nothing in the world is really pristine. But being luscious, being large, a seagrass meadow, they support rays. But they also have boats. And that's as poetic as I can get as an attempt to transition into the role of propeller scars now as disturbances in seagrasses. So this is kind of where my curiosity really clicked, and I got hooked into this project of, you know, how do they parallel and relate to what I've already been thinking about with ray pits in changing the morphological structure, the diversity, heterogeneity of what habitats available for animals making these ray pits. And now there's this unnatural, kind of similar, but pretty different type of disturbance in the seagrass from these boat propellers, being these long lines that you see in this photo, opposed to just being like one isolated hole. So I'm going to now transition into the role of propeller scars as disturbances. And don't worry, rays will make a little bit of comeback at the end. As we dive in, just a reminder, seagrasses, very important worldwide. They're critical habitats because of their structural complexity. They're important both at the habitat, like massive seascape scale, as long as that microhabitat scale. Think of that blue crab, you know, being hidden in there to properly eat. Animals use these meadows to seek refuge during their ecosystem migrations. And at that micro level, its canopy slows down currents and it provides ideal nursery and feeding habitat for many, many different types of animals. The structure of seagrass naturally comes in all shapes and sizes. Even though I'm focusing a lot on these luscious continuous beds, they can also naturally be patchy, having bare spots throughout the meadow. Be it from detrital piles, aquatic plants, the substrate, bioturbator pits, or grazed areas. All of these can create this heterogeneity within the seagrass. So within the Nature Coast of Florida, we have, for the most part, again, just super dense. There's a photo of it right above there where you can see how it changes, but there's a lot of seagrass. Boat activity, globally, has been on the rise by about 30% since the 1970s, both in the number of recreational boaters and the size of the boat. And boating activities with boat propeller scars or anchoring or mooring or just running aground, this has been a statewide Florida issue since the 1950s. and is even growing more in concern right now in these shallow seagrass areas that just kind of get hit. And you know, this image is actually a pretty low density of scars where you can see areas where it's mostly just lines and there's seagrass in between the lines. Like it can get extremely bad. So to address these concerns, NOAA Restore has funded a co-production effort called Scar Maps. Mark Clark is very much a PI on this as well. Seagrass conservation through actionable research, management areas for the prevention of scarring is a co-production project. And the part that I am postdocing within is the assessment of the ecological impacts of scars. It just started last year and is going for about 3 years. So we're about to start our second sampling very soon. We're collecting a very wide range of data. Today, I'm going to be sharing just like such brief insights into some of the potential effects on scars for seagrass flora and fauna to try to pair a bit with the Ray project that I just spoke about. So to dive in for this project, so what's going on your coast, very close to Gainesville? So to answer these questions of what's the ecological effects of these boat propeller scars, we're studying this in 3 different locations, in St. Martin's Key, Weehee Wachee, and Anclote. And we're studying this because they have different types of seagrass composition. So different types of ambient nutrients that's available for that seagrass to grow, think like nitrogen and phosphorus. What seagrass is fully there making that bed composition, how tall the grass is, how dense the grass is, that sort of thing. They all have their own unique little environmental conditions. So that's why we have 3 different locations. There are also targeted areas by some of our end users, stakeholders, and our committee within our advisory committee. Then dive in and thinking about each location. This one is Anclote. We selected about 8 to 10 sites. So you could think about this as like your plot in other manipulative experiments. It's just that our sites or plots are 1 hectare, so 100 meters by 100 meters. And Mark Clark very thankfully has mapped this, and so we do know the density of scars within these hectares.
Using drone survey?
Yes.
Cool.
Because not only are we interested in the ecological effects of individual scars, but thinking about that seascape, if there are multiple scars, maybe that alters what each individual scar does, the density of scars has on that environment. And then there's also a component, I'm not going today, but we're also trying to predict scar recovery, because you can't just restore all this stuff, but maybe you can target particular ones that are never gonna be restored by themselves. And so all of these aspects kind of accumulate together. So we have replicates at each of our locations, and within those replicates, we have varying densities of scars. So that image in the middle kind of shows you just 3 examples of a really high scarred area, medium scarred area, and low scarred area. Within each of these sites, 100 meter by 100 meters, the ecological data that we're going for at that smaller scale, so changes in seagrass community composition or what invertebrates are there, those are the X's, where again, we have 3 subsets of a scar along with a scar edge and seagrass that's not disturbed by that scar or any other scar, to then understand at those very micro levels if there's any changes, as well as having some replication subsample to get the good variation within each of those sites. And then for our fish trawls, wondering if there's any fish being changed by the scar density of the area. We trawl on our boat with an otter trawl. It's pretty big, it's like 2 meters wide of the mouth that opens on it. We roughly do that diagonally across our site and compare them. All right, I think I kind of already went through everything that this slide would have shown you of what we're doing here. Again, thank you, Mark, for making these. And so this is what those 3 sites three locations look like with their 8 to 11 sites total, with the heat color showing you roughly the density of those scars. And we even have a buffer around each of those 100 by 100 meter scars to see if the slightly like local area changes those fish communities, because fish within just 100 by 100 meters might not be the effect, but slightly larger area, since fish can move hundreds of meters throughout the day. And we have a total of 28 sites that we're studying for 3 years. So to examine, I just told you these earlier, for these measurements of looking at what might be changing within the seagrass. We are collecting it within the scar, at the scar edge, and within undisturbed seagrass 5 meters away from that scar, or any other type of disturbance that we can think of. I think the main thing, you see the data that we're collecting to see changes in the seagrass, but I think something interesting for this class or seminar is that scars, just like Ray hits me, and fields next to a forest, it creates this like very large contrast of an edge effect, which is known in ecology to really change like species diversity or what species are there. Sometimes it can increase diversity, sometimes it can decrease. It really depends. Like on a forest to field edge, it tends to increase it, at least for the first few years of that edge being occurred. So that's why we just separated those, because these are not just the scar, but it also is increasing edge area on seagrass, which can change predator-prey interactions. Can also change stability of grass being able to hold in and be stable, as well as reduce those currents of those canopies, one of the services that they provide. All of this, my disclaimers above are this is prelim data, so that means it's not all our data points, as well as I haven't been able to thoroughly QA/QC review all of this, but I wanted to be able to show you all some. So thinking about if biomass is removed at that hectare or site level, as scar density increases, we are seeing a slight trend toward, and that makes sense, when you have more scars, you're gonna have less of a seagrass biomass within the system. At the current estimates right now, here's one of our heavily scarred areas. You can see that there is quite a removal of grass. We have so much grass though, when you put this into percentage, it's about 1% of the seagrass habitat that is lost. It's not nothing, but it isn't as, it doesn't ring into that large ecological effect. Until you start thinking about, how does this change the interactions with the fauna? How does this change carbon storage? All of that. So those are things we're getting into this year and next year. So compiling a few metrics together, what's going on with that seagrass and then the fauna within it. We find that these scars are doing a few things. On the x-axis, we're just thinking of all plants that are there, submerged aquatic vegetation, and their percent cover. And so we are somewhat noticing as scar density increases, we are seeing that scars create patchiness, and this will increase the number of scars. At both the bed, so that large scale, and then microhabitat scale, we do observe some slight reductions in plant cover. As scar intensity or that density increases, beds are becoming more seagrass dominated, losing reducing the number of calcareous anchored macroalgae that's there, which in my mind of loving animals, I think, oh man, this is a reduction in the presence of structural complexity within these seagrass systems. For our seagrass associated invert sampling, we do have some prelims. Great. Again, it was still collected within these 3 areas. This was UF student honors thesis that just presented at the symposium yesterday. Celeste, where she recorded the number of fauna as well as what is there. So we're doing some species compositional differences. But basically what we're seeing is that as the grass gets removed from the scar, both along the edge of the seagrass and within the scar, we are losing the number of invertebrate species. But it's very dependent on if there's this stuff called drift macroalgae. Think like tumbleweeds in a desert. That's what it kind of looks like there. And it's so we do see that that is being used as habitat by those invertebrates. Potential concern because that is not anchored or a stable home, right? It could very much just move off and go off, whether or not that's important or not for the individuals that we're counting, but thought that we have been observing going through these data. For the fish community, again, that was along that entire site where we trawled, thinking about if scar density has an effect on the abundance or the size of fish that we are catching. And this basically shows you a lot of prelim data. We're not seeing too much of a striking pattern. And I will say that we took these in April when we basically only had one fish, the pinfish. And this is also at the start of the season growing. And so fish are coming in, they're settling, their larvae are settling, they're migrating in. And so we are this year going to take this at a higher peak in the season to see if there are these size distributional differences within our size density sites, as well as if there are compositional differences. So I showed you some microhabitat predator-prey interaction changes with rays, showing that potentially scallops get eaten more often in seagrass from blue crabs opposed to when they were in the ray pit. We're not specifically looking at these potential changes of within the scar and out of the scar altering predator-prey interactions. But there is a webinar that you can look into that has asked these questions, as well as PhD student Alex Wallace, who is also with the Nature Coast Biological Station in Mark Hensel's lab. And they are leveraging our design to expand upon Teresa's investigations and seeing if there are these predator-prey changes from propeller scars. So the last insight of scar effects on seagrass fauna that I wanted to cover today, so we're just about there. Hope y'all are doing well. Is exploring how the fragmentation of scars may interact with natural disturbances like grazing or bioturbation from the feeding pits. We have sea turtles, we have manatees, and we have rays. So as scars create edges, again, I think this can potentially facilitate foraging efficiency for these animals. And I keep thinking about that piece of the pie and the ease of going for the second piece of pie over that first piece of pie of it already being carved into. So I am curious if these scars may be attracting these animals to have kind of a synergistic effect on the loss or the recovery of seagrass when a scar is present, or something unknown, right? That's why we go and study. I didn't go over today, but we're looking at those ecological consequences of propeller scars for valuable seagrass services. And the other question that maybe I can come back and talk to at another semester is thinking about, if areas are so impacted from seagrass, is scar recovery too slow or not even possible without restoration? Where we're trying to observe scar recovery over a 3-year period to try to create a predictive model of what scars could recover on their own or not recover. And the hypothesis of these potential synergistic effects with some natural disturbances occurring really sung loud to me in just this last September when we were collecting data on these recovery scars. Because I had to have really in-depth thoughts of like what was in these scars, how wide they are, why is their width changing along the scar. Also I've found multiple times rays. I don't know if you can see it, but this is you can see 2, but there's actually like 11 like rays in this area. just like all hunkered down. I was also seeing tons of like stone crabs creating ledges within within those scars, using it as habitat, but also making the grass more vulnerable to erosion and flipping up like you could roll out a carpet. That's the vision I kept seeing when I was underwater. The mat just rolling away. So those are inquiries I'm really interested in. I don't have solid data for you on those today, but those are the type of things that I'm trying to get at. My side projects of the interactions with these fauna and these propeller scars. I did do some transects of wondering if ray pit density was increasing as scar and density increased. So again, think about that at that hectare scale of a ray being there, not being there. And basically in all of our sites, St. Martin's, Weekier, and Clote, as scar density increased, we didn't see really a difference in the number of rays there based on the number of pits I was seeing in seagrass or in a scar. So it doesn't seem to be, if I push that a little far, it doesn't seem to be moving their movement as much of where they are. But when I think about the ray pit differences of what's in a scar and what's in the seagrass adjacent to that scar, we are seeing, it doesn't even matter on this x-axis of scar density, just in general, we are seeing about double the number of ray pits within a scar compared to the seagrass right adjacent to it. And so you are kind of seeing that microhabitat. Once they are in an area, they are appearing to go more towards an open area versus cutting that slice of that pie. If that makes sense, explaining it that way. So with some of this pilot data, we're definitely going to be driving this a little bit more for my own curiosity's sake. So very excited to do that. This field work literally starts next Tuesday with weather being on our side. I hope you learned that megafauna are still very much ecologically relevant in our marine ecosystems through eating, scaring, and modifying habitat. Maybe a little bit on the scaring, didn't get into that too much today. But I hope you've also learned that our actions can change their ecological role. And that always species interactions and their natural disturbances should be in and kept in the conversation for coastal management. So that is the time for some questions and lovely discussion if we have time for it.
Awesome, we have time, thank you. All right, so questions for Dr. Hensel from the room, and then we'll check out YouTube here. Sure.
Yeah, great presentation. I have two questions.
Sure.
One, have you noticed with the high scarring areas, can it get to a certain point where there's so much scarring that there's not even edge benefits for the stingrays anymore? Because there's just so much, like, can it get to that point?
Absolutely, there are areas in Florida that so much scarring occurred that you would think the entire bed is kind of degraded ecologically, or just like functionally not relevant at that point. I would say that we are not quite at that level in our 28 sites that I have gone to. There's two concerning areas that's really important in our co-production. In St. Martin's, it's a really big fishing spot. And there's one particular island that it is getting really bad. It got a little bit hit by Helene as well. And so that is my most concerned area for how that seagrass is, all the stressors that are going on with it.
Yeah, and then second question, just wondering from your insights so far, what kind of management strategies do you feel like could be well recommended for boats and management?
So the larger component project scar maps, I'm just we have like, let's say 6 research questions total.
At least.
Okay.
6 formal.
And I'm 3 and 4, and I'm the PI within those, right? Or I'm the postdoc within that of 2 PIs over A. So the larger component of what really inspired this is the main PI, Savannah Berry, and colleagues such as Mark. They have already like 10 years of data trying to do education at the ramp. I'm doing the long-winded answer for you. The short answer is, no motor pole only spots. But this comes from evidence of showing, or trying to do public awareness and education, not just with surveys, doing with like public talks. But also having these like gorgeous informative signs at the boat ramp. Having floatable buoys to try to deter you from areas or let you know on the channel markers, like warning, seagrass is to the left of this channel marker, avoid it, right? And showing that statistically that it has not been effective. Even on when you take up, yeah, there's a ton of education even when you do your boat license, your like safety boat license that's required for Floridians to like ride a boat, drive a boat. There's all sorts about seagrass, and statistically these are not having much changes. And so what is now recommended is a hard policy change of this. The idea is wondering if, how would this work with the community? Would it be cooperative? Would it, be best both ecologically, but also socially? If there are particular areas that are no motor, a pole and troll like only zone, is that the right way to state that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that actually a lot of this management, I mean, these are within aquatic preserves, and so they are inherently there to protect that resource. But they're also heavily utilized, like, Andy said before about, fishing folk and whatnot, and
There's so fun.
scalpers, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And so they actually came to us, meaning the university, in saying, what can be done about this? So the end user is oftentimes also motivating. It's not just kind of pure science side of things. And so this,
Area that's all scarred up.
Yeah.
Or you don't want to be the charter that's asking money for people to, and then you take them there. So, yeah.
so the concept of a pole and troll zone, which means no like larger motors, and that any motor that you have is more electric, but you're slowing everything down, you're able to be a lot more proximal to the environment you're working in versus just blasting through it, not understanding. So I think that's a lot of the problem. There's the guides out there know exactly what their boats draft in the sense of how deep their propeller is in the water, and they're tricked out. Oftentimes they can run in really skinny water, but there's a lot of people that are utilizing these areas that really don't have a clue about what they're doing, and they end up in situations where they're run aground, but then they don't stop. They keep pushing, and so we see just remarkable scarring, which is absolutely ridiculous out
And
there.
accidents absolutely do happen too.
Yeah, yeah.
And
yeah,
that
true.
fix, so we
Yeah.
never stop with the public awareness and the education, but we're saying additionally, we're at the step of where this happens, so that's what's recommended right now, but we're backing it, of course, with ecological, environmental, and social science.
We have a question from YouTube from this guy named Peter Frederick, and he asks, how dense should seagrass meadows be? Are there benefits to having patchy coverage deriving from natural sources? In Florida Bay, some of the worst die-offs were in areas with the highest grass density.
I am all for diversity of animals and habitat heterogeneity, coming from, so that's my answer of, I think there are benefits to having all, and there are some areas that would do better being lush or not lush. But if you're in a natural area that is just having natural stressors, it's probably, stabilized to what it can contain, both nutrient and its grazing intensity. But why I think, patchy or different, it can attract various different animals and how they use it, how they feed, when they get food, be it a migration species coming in. Certain groupers are really reliant on very particular algae species, and those algal species might, they need an area to land, so that patchiness might be able to help it. Just one like of a random example, so no, I think all shapes and sizes of grasses are great. We do get concerned with urbanized areas or stressed areas. Obviously, when you get patchy, you're gonna get some, there's more of it to can go sooner because there's less of it there. With the luscious seagrass, they're saying they saw the most die off. That can certainly happen when storms occur and all of it gets covered with sand, whether it was luscious or not luscious.
Okay.
Is seagrass it for most of these organisms, or can they go deeper and feed off benthic invertebrates and things like that, or even shallower into mud flats? Or is this the main ecosystem that supplies the whole?
There are other ecosystems to eat in. Within the seagrass, it's not just what's on the seagrass, like the amphipods or the snails, but it is what's on the ground. Like hermits and worms, and inside the ground below, either just like a pencil deep or, a clipboard deep of clams or worms. And there are mud flats as well. Mud flats are actually typically, when I'm thinking about rays, they actually tend to have more ray pits for seagrass in the surveys. It's just that just creates topography difference, maybe not habitat difference. And we also have mangrove islands and oyster reefs. Those are also very important areas for finding food for animals. As well as exposed limestone that look like patch reefs that also accumulate a lot of animals for resting and eating. Did that answer your question? Okay.
All right, last one. We'll let Dr. Clark have it. Yeah, okay.
So, and a great presentation. I'd love seeing all the action, because
Thank you. There's
we
the
see-
carpet, by the way.
Yeah.
we see it from well above. This is like the first time we're actually in the water. So either way, if you looked at the distribution of prey items for the rays. And, not necessarily the hectare scale, but across this landscape, would they be relatively uniform? My curiosity is, are the rays targeting these bare spots because that's where the food is? Or is that an easier access point to food that might be otherwise equally distributed throughout the area?
I'm starting to get at those numbers a little bit, and I am using scallops because they're so easy to you see them, they're not, scallops don't dig, they're little swimmers, they're like sitting on the top, so you can see them while you're it's a multitask option for me in the field, and those are items you have to think as a researcher, especially if it's a side project of like what takes the most minimal time. So I'm starting to get at that. I do not have that. In Virginia, I did try to use pit holes as a energy effort of looking, because I did have that bivalve distribution. Because in Virginia, they do massive surveys for the number of scallops and the number of blood arcs. And I did not see that. I saw that rays were everywhere, regardless if the bivalve density was high or not. And I even saw slightly, but not statistically significant, a little bit more effort in the low areas, which is also trying to show me a little bit that they're gonna still dig anyway. It's not just necessarily they can like sniff this out, at least for scallops, like maybe there was something else there they were going for. Clams that were hidden. So definitely could be the case that this area is being scarred more because it's a good fishing spot, and rays are there because it's a good fishing spot for them. Those are questions I'd love to gather, and I'm hopefully getting at answering that a little bit more. Thanks. Yeah.
All right, well, let's give one more round of applause. Dr. Benthic, thank you.
Made sense, and didn't ramble too soon.
And we have one more seminar for the semester. We have Dr. Jorge Lorenzo Trueba coming to be with us in person next week, talking about a moving boundary perspective on coastal wetlands and barrier systems. So he's from geology here at UF. Thank you very much, and we will see you